Hey everybody, this is Stymie Jackson back with my third of my Let's Play videos. This is, again, Mordheim City of the Den beta, and this time I'm going to be doing Merchant Quarters 2 Hunters and Prey, which is kind of similar to the setup we did in the last video, except it's on the other Merchants map. Hunters and Prey is a straight-up strike teams formation. That means you're going to have 3 teams of 3, which is going to be generally 3 or 4 guys, depending on if you have an impressive or not. Both teams are set up the same way, so it's kind of fair. You're not going to be too close to the enemy. You're not going to start right on top of each other's laps, at least. But you're going to have some points where you're fairly close, within maybe 1 or 2 turns of movement. And in this mission, it really rewards the person that concentrates their forces first. So in this mission, find where the enemy is, localize your forces, and beat them up while you have the advantage. As you can see at the start of the game, I kind of see where one of his groups is. There's going to be at least 3 guys there. So the Maiden is great for this. Now that they've changed it, so prayers are very likely to get off, prayers being the sister spells. These are all great utility spells. This will make everybody faster and better at climbing, which is very useful early in the game when you're striving for position. So the first thing I'm going to do here is concentrate 2 of my teams together as quickly as possible. This is the third group right here you're looking at, which is the farthest away. So I'm going to just move this one girl here to basically be the rear guard and immediately get my matriarch over to the rest of the team. Don't want to be caught alone like that, because if the enemy is doing the same thing, he can jump my group. So if I can get all 3 teams in generally the same area of the map, I should just be able to overwhelm them piecemeal, which is pretty important for the sisters since you have no ranged firepower. You don't want to pile into each other and block each other's paths, obviously, but you need to be close and support and just gang up on people. If you can make people feel they're all alone checks, you're going to get free attacks, and it makes the fighting as sisters much, much easier. Now, that was the enemy boss we just saw there hiding behind the building, and he's actually moving away from where I'm doing the major concentration. I know he's got a team of guys between 2 of my teams. He should be sending support here as quickly as possible. If he doesn't, you know, he don't need to be Napoleon to realize 6-on-3 is going to probably win that fight. Even if it's all henchmen on heroes, that's just bad news for the defending team. We get our first look at one of the enemy henchmen. These guys are awesome. They had the artistic look of the really, really old Games Workshop stuff. We're talking the really ancient John Blanchard pictures. You've probably seen this kind of imagery with these guys with the hoods in other horror games and movies that have been out recently. And I'm not saying Games Workshop invented it, but this look of the cultist, you know, they kind of did it a long time ago. And I'm really glad to see that traditional look back here in Mordheim. It's really retro, especially with the impending death of Warhammer Fantasy as we know it. At least we're getting the video games coming out now, finally. Now, as to my build with my sisters, there's 3 guys that are wearing heavy armor only in this setup. 2 of the henchman sisters, the full-blown ones, not the novices. They're going to be our tank expendable troops. They've got shield set in the one hand and, of course, a 2-hander in the other for when they want to do damage. Now, that does kill their mobility, but between the athletic spell that you saw before and what the Sister Superior has, and she's got the ability for giving up 2 of her blue, to add 2 movement to anybody that she wants. And that's really good for boosting up someone really slow, like the matriarch. If she's nearby, she can make the matriarch in heavy armor now just as fast as anybody else with +2 movement. The other thing that's good with the henchman sisters is that if they pick up warpstone, no matter what the effect is, they're going to also get another +2 to their movement. So again, the sisters can move very quickly, even with heavy armor. The rest of the team is basically going to be with cloth for dodging. That's going to be the novices, and of course my other spellcaster, the Purifier. She can only wear cloth anyway. I've also put it this time on the Maiden. Since she's going to be doing damage sets, she's not going to be able to parry. There's just no weapons we have other than the shield that can let us parry as sisters. So she's going to be using dodges, and the only way to really do that is with cloth, not heavy armor. She's going to be a little more vulnerable, but hoping her added speed and her initiative, because as you can tell, she goes first here. With the way she's set up. So she's going before anybody else, and that's fantastic. She's a little bit softer because of it, but with that much health, you know, hopefully she'll be able to survive anyway and get her damage done. The Sister Superior, who is there just purely to buff people with speed and provide another sort of tank, is actually in light armor because I don't want her falling too far behind, especially if she's going to be giving up movement to improve other people's movement. She's got to stay moving. Finally, that's basically the setup. So it's mostly cloth, a little bit of light armor, and a little bit of heavy armor. That's just the way the balance works now. But at least with sisters, you can get away with playing heavy armor. It's not going to bog you down. My enemy is playing a very heavy armored setup too with Chaos, with a lot of 2-handed weapons, and I think it's being a problem here because he cannot get his guys together fast enough. The sisters here are really, really quick. So I'm pretty happy with it. Maybe when they redo the armor systems, we might change this around a little bit better. But novices are great at dodging. They have a high agility. They have a skill that lets them dodge even better once they've done damage. So there's no reason for novices not to be in cloth. Everyone else should be picking armor as necessary. And of course, for your purifiers, you got no choice in the matter. Same thing with the augers. Speaking of the purifier, it is time to start this fight. I've got my girls in position. I've got my maiden there to be the spearhead. Time to draw him in with a little bit of ranged firepower. Now, if you don't like the sisters because they lack range, which they completely do, they have no range regular weapons, you can still take 2 purifiers now, and each of them with a fireball. And it's actually one of their 8 prayers they're going to be getting, so I think it's even possible, theoretically, that you can give fireball to the maiden and to the matriarch as well if you so desired, and have up to 4 guys with fireballs. So it looks like we're really going to be able to compensate for that. Not that I'd say you should put fireballs on all those guys. You know, the maiden is going to be wanting to be attacking with her hands more often than anything else. And the other utility prayers seem to be pretty good, especially once they start getting leveled up. Heal, for example, is a little puny right now, but once it's been leveled up, it's going to heal for quite. And I think you guys can see the impending murder going to go on here. 6 on 3. He's got 2 henchmen. He's got 1 possessed. He's in big trouble. And he hasn't tried to break out or go across that bridge to escape. He's trickling in support. Yeah, this is going to be a good game for the girls, boys. Anyway, one thing to talk about with the Chaos is I've heard a lot of complaints that they're underpowered. I've heard that they're, iffy. We're actually looking at some of his guys right here, especially his big spawn. I've heard the spawn is terrible, doesn't do enough damage. A couple points about this. The big thing with Chaos is that they are psychology oriented. They have fear, they have terror. They really can mitigate your ability to hurt them back. Right now in this part of the game, since the parties are new and relatively young, people fail psychology tests all the time. The average henchman has like a 30 to maybe 40% chance of passing on your own test, which is where if you're outnumbered 2 to 1, do you panic and flee, or failing fear and terror, which is caused by some of the demons and some of the bigger guys. So it's real easy to fail. So if you want to play Chaos right, that means leveraging your fear and terror. The other thing is that if you're equipping your possessed, make sure you put an armband on both of their arms. Otherwise, you're just running around with like a one-handed weapon and nothing else. You're not going to do any damage. The possessed and the spawn are dual wielders. They're not two-handers. They're the equivalent of dual wielders, like having 2 maces. So make sure you put your close combat alternate bracers, whatever the hell you want to call them, on both of your arms, and you're going to find your possessed do a lot more damage. And it begins. He moves up and he triggers the ambush on my maiden, but unfortunately she gets clobbered back by a 2-handed hammer. Yeah, that's what happens sometimes with the 2-handers. She's got a helmet. It just didn't work out for me. I take a stun. Luckily, she's got the health to take it. So, yeah, it's tough luck for the maiden, but I've got 5 more girls right behind it. And if he doesn't get out of there, he's about to feel the wrath. Now, again, we get to see his big guy running around in the background. Got no idea what he's doing with it. That's my wagon he's next to, so he can continue to move around to the staircase I came down, or he can move over somewhere else or start jumping down. He's being way too cautious. But he might also have the steal my idol mission, which means if that's actually his objective, he can be very close to winning this game. He's got to grab it and bring it back to his wagon. And I've left my wagon undefended. I don't know what his alternate victory conditions are, so we're going to see. That last fighting you saw with the possessed, you might have noticed is really crappy damage. That was really the fault of running across a trap. There's a lot of traps in the game now. You're going to see me springing them left and right. I'm sure you've seen them too. You got to be careful with it. But at least the maiden, even though she's hurting and she's debuffed, she can take that beating, and she's dishing it out in return. So this is foregone conclusion. He's got his 3 guys here. I've got my 6, and he's already lost one of his 3. So the other group, of course, continues their movement, and I'm actually searching around. I'm thinking now I might have the chance to jump his boss. I thought his boss moved into this building. And what you're going to see here is the kind of stuff that upsets the people that think backtrack is a bad mechanism. I'm running all over this stupid house looking for the guy, which I wouldn't be able to do, obviously, if I couldn't backtrack. But in the end, I really just end up wasting my turn because, as you probably figured out from watching, the dude's not in the building anymore. He's already hightailed it and left. So this poor girl ends up running in circles doing nothing. And it's a bad move on my part because I'm stalling. We did see his big guy just standing right there. If he wanted to bring in that team, he could actually be doing this to me. He'd be taking his central team, combining it with the team that's got his spawn, and collapsing on my leader and her 2 henchwomen. That would have been bad for me, but instead I managed to get lucky. He doesn't commit, and I get away with it. Time to hunt down this last archer up in the building. I'm only going to send one sister after her because it's a novice. I should be able to handle one archer, you would expect, right? I mean, this should be an easy fight. We'll be back here in a little bit to check in on that. Down below, the pylon on the possess continues. And here's his chance to do something with his boss. This is the guy I was hunting and obviously failed to find. He does move it to a more defensive location, but that's about it. He really needs to be committing his guys at this point because I'm about to take out a third of his force in one fell swoop. So again, with strike teams, you can't just count on camping and sitting around. You don't have your entire team behind you. A lot of the other deployments are like this. They're going to reward aggressive mobile play. So that is really one reason why I don't think handguns, well, they're very powerful right now and they're probably a little bit unbalanced. I don't find them excessively OP. We're going to look at this a lot more in my next video where it becomes, I guess, the COD kiddies have descended upon Mordheim with the last sale. Most of the games I've been playing in the last few days since the hotfix have been mercenary, gun heavy. We're talking 6 or 7 to 8 guns in per team, sometimes only Skaven with all pistols. These teams are horrible, and I'm sure while they work against people who don't know what's going on with the game mechanics, or playing games like Rivals where you're just set up opposite each other and it really facilitates camping. If you don't know where the alternate paths are, if you're not good at exploring, then you're going to have a lot of trouble dealing with that. And that's why a lot of people are complaining about how OP guns are. And look, they are a little bit powerful, probably too much so. But a lot of it is scenario. Do you think someone with guns scattered around the map here would be able to hold up to my sisters at all? Of course not. So don't fall in the trap games when people are hosting lobbies. If you see an Empire person hosting a map and you don't know what the deployment is, if it's not set around them, you might want to think twice about joining it. And hey, look, if that's bothering you or making you worried, keep in mind, guys, this game is barely out of alpha. I would even hesitate to call it beta. It's still relatively early in the early access, if that doesn't sound too redundant and stupid. And the developers have been doing an amazing job of giving us new content. About once a month, there's a big patch, and the big patch breaks a bunch of stuff. Desyncs were plaguing the game for the last few days, but within less than a week, they roll out a bug fix patch. And many of the problems have already vanished. I mean, yes, there's still going to be issues, and there's still going to be tons of balance concerns, but constantly changing and making things better. Already in just the last few weeks, we've seen significant changes to balance. People right now are saying the game favors dodge builds, it favors two-handers, it favors guns. To a certain extent, all that is true, but a lot of it is overblown. Again, a lot of it comes down to scenarios, as I've been saying about already in this video. A lot of it comes down to just uncreative cloning. You hear on the internet that guns are OP and everyone does it. I've been watching people play games that are Twitch broadcasting, and it looks like you're watching the OK Corral reenactment where 6 guys are standing against other 6 guys, and they're shooting in the face with guns from 10 feet away. It's really frustrating to watch because it's totally incompetent. If you were sending in some melee guys, sure, you got to sacrifice 1 or 2 to the guns to die. But then at that point, you can just rip apart all these guys standing around, and they can't counterattack. They're not in defensive stances. One guy with a two-hander would demolish huge chunks of these forces. So a lot of the imbalance, I think, is just a lack of understanding of game mechanics. And if you run the numbers, defensive stuff is actually not too bad. While shields are still, I think, a little bit subpar, that may change as more skills enter the game, as parties get more advanced, and as the balance is coming closer together. What you're going to see now is tiring weapons, the big damaging attacks, are now becoming more and more unreliable. They don't hit as often. There's a lot more negatives associated with it. So if that's all you're spamming, you're going to find yourself starting to lose more and more games to people with balanced loadouts, and that's only a good thing in my book. Back in the action, I've blocked myself off. I thought I left enough room there to get around, but as often happens, you can't. So the next thing to do is to start jumping forward. And if you're going to be jumping forward as a sisters, yeah, you might want to go put the Blessing Athletics down first. For comedy's sake, keep an eye on the debuff list on my maiden for the rest of this match. You're just going to see it get bigger and bigger as time goes on. Anyway, I'm trying to figure out what to do with her here. There's really only one jump down point on this side. So after a bit of messing around, that's the way she eventually goes. Now this one henchwoman finds herself off on the side. She was the one that did all the exploring and failed to find the enemy boss. But now she realizes where it is, and she's between the boss and that last final group of 3 reinforcements. I'm still concerned about them going in. I expected any time my opponent to attack me with his spawn. So this girl is going to find a nice spot to sit and really just act as bait. I'm hoping to lure out his spawn, and if his spawn's going to be attacking anybody, it's going to be my most expendable character with the best dodge. And hey, maybe she'll get a few hits in anyway. The force over here continues to flank, so we can surround and outnumber, and now I start to run into his reinforcements. And Overwatch is fantastic for disrupting your opponent's movement, because it basically commits your move as soon as you get a hit. It's like walking over a trap or taking an action. So Overwatch Fire, while it doesn't do a lot of damage with the bows, those classes, those cultists, are really, really useful to the Chaos strategy. At least you want a couple of them to be cannon fodder and to be for Overwatch. They've got skills that really benefit their Overwatch, so they almost never miss. Back to the fight in the attic. This little archer and my henchwoman are still going at it, trying to attack each other. It's taken a lot longer than I expected. I figured with dual maces it would go pretty easily, but that's the thing with high damage weapons, especially when you're attacking somebody with a shield. They're just not super reliable. When they hit, they certainly hit for a ton of bricks, though, and that's why people love them. And here my opponent blows his opportunity to bring one of his more important characters, his spellcaster, into the combat. He's got a bunch of good spells, an offensive one that's short-ranged, and a nice buff for the teammates. As long as his spells don't backfire on him, he's good. And he actually is fairly decent in close combat. As with most spellcasters, obviously he doesn't have any capability to sustain a long fight, but he can do some damage while he wants to. He's the kind of guy that thrives supporting the sides of a fight and then leaping in when necessary. But when he's standing all the way over there, maybe he's afraid of my guys that are in the middle in those buildings or something, but he needs to be bringing his boss to help. And he's just abandoning these guys to his fate. So it's probably pretty typical for Chaos to do that, but it's not going to win you very many games. But hey, you know, such are your problems when you fight for the Dark Gods. Back to my enemy's turn, and this is the other archer I've been engaging. After a little bit of thinking about it, my opponent finally does switch to his close combat set. What you're going to notice is prior to this I was casting spells. It was because I walked over that stupid trap which ended my movement before I can engage. I was trying to bring this guy around the back to leave room for the other girls to attack with. And instead, you know, I end up being just 3 inches away, so I'm not actually engaged with this guy. He has the opportunity to escape here, which is what I would have done. At this point, you know, the fighting's going bad. I would have pulled back to his other guys. But he gives it the old college try and gets a nice good hit. And it's not a bad idea against my Purifier, because she isn't really wearing any armor. So one-handed weapons are really going to chew her, and it just like any other cloth wearer up. What we also finally saw there was the enemy's probably trying to go for the win. So even though he's losing tactically, he may be winning the strategic battle here. He just stole my idol. If he can get that back to his wagon, he instantly wins the game. My alternate victory condition, if you were noticing in the beginning of the game, that text on the left of the screen, is to gather words Weirdstone. I need to pick up 11 pieces, so it's kind of a lot, so I'm not really focusing it on now. I'm just focusing on kicking my opponent's ass, which is more fun to me anyway than picking up stuff from the ground. But you will eventually start to see me picking stuff up anyway, because it's probably a good idea to start getting in the habit anyway. The game's economy is based upon that green stuff, that Weirdstone. The more of it you get, the better off you do. It helps you pick what gear you're going to get. I guess you can sell it for money. It counts as reputation rewards. The whole point is to grab that green crap. Anyway, that was a little bit of an embarrassing sequence there with my matriarch trying to climb the wall and totally failing. I kind of expected that, so that's why with my last move, instead of going for the third try, I move her out of the way. To add insult to injury, her spell fails because she gets the result truce, which means basically the spell has no effect whatsoever. So she's taking damage and she can't even be bothered to heal it off of herself. But minor setbacks. Overall, everything else is going pretty much the girl's way. Now this henchwoman shows the matriarch how it's done and successfully climbs the wall, and when she gets to the top, she realizes she doesn't have quite enough maneuver range to get into the combat. So she's going to do and grab some warpstone. Now I might have mentioned this earlier, that her class is the sister henchwoman. There's a lot of the classes that actually get a benefit for picking up Weirdstone. Warpstone, whatever you want to call this green stuff. Basically, so it's not just negative, because there are random negative effects. There's a couple positive effects. And for classes that have skills, it actually does reward you for picking it up. So there's going to be a lot of good reasons, I think, to do more than just sit and camp. You're going to want to explore. You're going to want to get the equipment that they've got stashed. You can find magic gear and potions and this weird stone everywhere. Obviously, it doesn't really have any effect at this point because there's no persistency. But for the classes that do have beneficial skills for picking up warp stone, you might want to look into it. That's going to be your Verminkin. They get extra damage. And all the factions are going to have at least 1 or 2 people that benefit from weird stone. Except I think the Empire Mercs. They have normal skills that are more applicable in more cases, but they really don't have anything that helps them gather up the weird stone because, you know, they don't have the blessing of Sigmar upon them, and they aren't mutant freaks that already love this stuff anyway. So that's to be expected. You get your guns, be happy with it. This archer does not want to die, so we get what looks like a really bad fight between 2 incompetents slapping each other in the attic. They're probably going to be here for a while, and they're probably going to be here well past the end of the game, continuing to slap each other almost ineffectually. Anyway, whereas before I was hoping to hook his spawn with my bait that was left out there, the little sacrifice to the Chaos Gods I've left, I actually get a target that's much more valuable. It draws his Magister out from where the guy was camping. Now, he was sitting up there in a defensive stance on top of the climb point, which to me is completely ridiculous, because if he's blocking the climb point, I can't get to him. So why go on ambush? Why go on a D-stance? There's not another climb point anywhere near there where I could possibly get there in one turn. At that point, my opponent appears to be just too cautious. This is chaos of all things. Like the sisters, I think they benefit from a very much aggressive gameplay. At least if you're playing with the spawn and with the possessed. With his boss committed, it's time to commit mine. I have the chance now to assassinate his leader, and this is going to bring his morale down to pretty much the breaking point or close to it, especially once I deal with a few of the henchmen he's got behind me that right now I'm just ganging up on beating down. So what's useful about charge really here is even though it takes extra OP, it's not too much of a big deal when you have a one-handed weapon. It's not going to cost me any attacks really, and it also allows me to save my last 2 blue moves so I can go into a defensive stance. So at this point, I feel really comfortable risking my boss. If I was going to play cautiously, I would have withdrawn her and let my henchmen deal with it. But going for the gusto, this guy's left himself exposed with his biggest guy. So let's take him down and see if we can't win this game right away. With the rest of my moves for this turn, I actually go to cut off his support. Right now, a 2-to-1 advantage on his boss is most likely going to be enough. I could always send some more support in if I need to. But I'd rather keep this guy out of the fight for now, especially if I can force some on-your-own test against his leader, which would make this fight even quicker. So a couple of my other guys will move into supporting positions, move into blocking positions, and I think at this point, you know, all 3 of my teams are together, and just combined forces is unstoppable tide of chicks in armor. It's beautiful to behold. Well, at least from my perspective, it's beautiful to behold. Now I finally managed to take down this archer who I've been battling with for a few turns here. This also is something I did wrong. It would have been far more efficient to me to switch over to 2-handed weapons or whatever the damage sets I have on these girls are. That's just one lone archer. He's really not going to do enough damage to kill or really significantly hurt any of my guys before I can kill him. So yeah, I do enjoy the Sigmarite mace. I like it a lot. It looks visually great and it's useful. But I should not be relying on it nearly so much. That's actually a mistake I'm making. Shields are useful. You know, they're not as bad as everyone says, but if you're just going to use shields, you're going to lose games. You got to know when to switch back and forth, and that was a big, big fail on my part here. Fortunately, though, I'm rolling well, so it doesn't really matter too much. It's not going to impact the game. But that's really a bad habit to get into. Don't be lazy. If you have the SP, the blue points, don't be afraid to switch sets and as appropriate as dictated by the situation. There's the spawn. Round 6, and we still have yet to see him. He is now finally getting into position. He's actually moving towards the spot that the enemy magistrate was standing. If you remember before he jumped down to try and get at my little novice I left as bait, that's right now where this spawn is standing. So he is now finally one turn away from joining the combat. As you might be expecting from the morale bar and the situation with his leader, yeah, that's pretty much at least one turn too late, and I probably saved 3 or 4. It's at this point, I probably have a habit of doing this in my videos, of beating dead horses, and I'm definitely doing one here, but the spawn has got to commit to combat. You don't want to be stupid about it. You don't want to get shot up on the way in. You don't want to run into 6 guys and then get beat down. But you got to be sending in the spawn to help support your fights. And if the enemy has a choice of, crap, I got his spawn on me, I've got a fear-causing possessed on me, there's a couple of his henchmen beating on me with 2-handed weapons, throwing all that stuff at the guy at once is really going to be advantageous, especially when you couple in all the crazy psychology effects that chaos has. Anyway, towards the end of this game here, I think it's fairly fitting that my bait novice is the one that finally takes down the enemy leader. If you're wondering about what the setup is, it's pretty easy. It's double mace, cloth armor, and a helmet. I also use a shield in the offset in case I need to charge some entrenched archers. You know, the extra range resistance a shield offers can come in very handy when you need to charge an entrenched position. It never comes in handy here, and for the most part, I'd much rather have them have the high initiative from having the double maces out. And that's basically it for my enemy. He finally routs, and as you can see, a flawless victory for the sisters. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, this is really just a demonstration of different deployments and how much fun they can be. And if you play to the strengths of the deployment, you can crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of their leader. See ya.